accounted for. Now, the pain at the pump has Kenyans disgusted as the 16% fuel tax takes effect, and the judiciary is on edge as number 2 in the bench is taken to court over graft allegations. Later on Time Bar, we assessed the pump prices this day 6 years ago when President Uhuru Kenyatta first came to office. Sit back, buckle up. We are tightening our belts tonight. But first, my take. Now, the new prices of petroleum products occasioned by the new levy on petroleum products is a recipe for chaos. They are not good for business, and neither are they good for the country. Our view is that the petroleum levy is unnecessary. It portends economic crisis for this country, hence should not be implemented now or in the future. A caring government listens, responds to public's concerns, and obviously acts in the interest of the citizens. But the authorities chose to pussyfoot over the matter ostensibly to ensure the new levy comes into effect. Now, the Kenya Revenue Authority set the ball rolling by directing oil marketers to start implementing the 16% value-added tax on fuel. Now, the Energy Regulatory Commission, which is responsible for determining the pump prices, followed suit and raised prices by huge margins. For example, petrol prices goes up by more than 12 shillings per litre, now the highest in the recent years. Well, on this matter, the citizens feel betrayed. They have been left on their own to face the vagaries of economic forces. Last week, Parliament voted against the Finance Bill 2018 that sought to introduce the levy. We lauded the move because it reflected the thinking of many Kenyans. At least the public felt the members of Parliament had acted in their best interest. We thought so. Now, that vote will give the government time to rethink the strategy and Parliament the opportunity to review and conclusively deal with the issue. With the benefit of hindsight, questions are now emerging whether Parliament really acted in all honesty. Why had it taken, or why had it to wait till the last minute before discussing and dispensing with the matter? It is even confounding to learn that the correct procedure was not used to table the motion. Was Parliament playing to the public gallery? All said and done, Kenyans are hurting. The feeling is mutual across the board. All eyes are now on State House, and what the president does or doesn't will be direction setting. IMF and its cautionary loan deserves a rethink in the face of the looming economic crisis in the country that requires urgent intervention. Now, the gains being sought from the fuel tax is not worth the agony and the economic catastrophe it engenders. Now, we need to clarify and predictability in the economy, and therefore the government should act swiftly and reverse this fuel tax. We cannot talk of growing the economy while at the same time escalating the cost of the factors of production with huge margins. Now, Treasury must explore other ingenious ways of collecting taxes. Moreover, it must deal ruthlessly, cut extravagance, and instill prudence in management of public resources. In the words of Winston Churchill, for a nation to try and tax itself into prosperity, it's like man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself out with a handle. My guest tonight, Kimani Ichung'wa, MP Kikuyu, Kwame Owino, CEO IEA, Gladys Wanga, who is a Homa Bay women representative. We're waiting for her to come to studio, and of course Okiya Omtatah, human rights activist. My name is Ken Mijungu. Welcome to the program. Sidebar begins right now.
How reasonable is it to have a tax constituting about half the price of a product?
Kwa hakika government yetu ilikuwa imetuambia kuwa wanaenda kuongelea hii mswada ya mafuta, wanaipeleka bungeni. Na kuipeleka bungeni tukawa tumeambiwa kuwa hiyo mswada haitapitishwa. Ghafla binvu tunashangaa mambo mafuta imeongezeka.
Hadi nilikuwa na badia 30 pop. Asubuhi nilikuta nikichachiwa 50 pop.
Hii ya mafuta. Unaona hata imekauka, haina kitu. Sasa hii ninapanga nitafuta hapo kambao tunanitumane na itoshi.
Hatuna pesa. Mapato yenye unapata ni kidogo.
Imekuwa ni balaa, maana sasa unaona wameongeza mafuta, mshahara ni pale pale.
Kiangalia tu inatumika na yule mtu wako na pesa mingi peke yake. tutakuwa tunavinyiria mwenye anapata mapato kidogo.
Kama unapepa mtu anafaa kulipe 50, ukimwongezea umwambie atalipa 100, itakuwa ngumu kwake kuongeza 100 na amezoea 50.
Kila kitu napika kwangu natumia mafuta ya taa. Na hii pikipiki yangu kwa siku inaniletea shilingi 200. Hii shilingi 200 nikianza kugawa napata hata mafuta nanunua ya mbao.
Hii mafuta pale imefikia, kwa kusema kweli, ni kila gharama ya maisha itapanda. Kwa kuwa mwananchi wa chini anadhulumiwa, hawezi pata maisha yake ambayo inafanya. Ukienda kwa unga utapanda, ukienda kwa upande wa kubeba kwa ubiri utapanda. Sasa mimi nashindwa kweli, hii Kenya tunaelekea wapi?
Kwa nafanya kazi Busia, nikikunywa mafuta hapa Bumala, amini Uganda. Pia sasa 131 na mimi naona hapa ni 110. Si hata heri nikunyunge mafuta hapa kwa boda.
Pambu zote hasina mafuta. Rodi ndio hii imesimama. Hakuna vile itaweza enda ilete hiyo mafuta. Mafuta bei iko juu zaidi. Hiyo ndio tunaomba sana mtusaidie. Kwa sababu hata sisi pamba tenda, kama hakuna mafuta, hakuna vile tutaweza kukaa kwa station bila mafuta.
Kwa nini wasifikirie watoe ile 15 shillings per liter fuel levy maintenance?
Bwana Rotich ni lazima aheshimu bunge, aheshimu mahakama na aheshimu executive. Na hawezi kusema yeye ataongeza kuweje liwalo na liwalo. Yeye ni nani? Akiendelea hivyo, sisi tutaungana na Wakenya wengine wa kawaida, wale ambao watakaokuwa wamefinywa, kuhakikisha ya kwamba sio waziri tena.
All right, that's a good place to begin with my guest tonight as we wait for Gladys Wanga if she'll show up. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I want to begin where the problem is. Where is the problem? Let me begin with Kwame. Where is the problem? Is it us? Is it Parliament? Is it IMF?
Let me start with where it is not.
Yeah.
It is not IMF.
Okay.
Because the IMF does not put a gun to the heads of members of Parliament and tell them to raise taxes or not. So that's the first thing. So where is the problem? The problem is, to be honest, between Parliament and the executive.
Okay.
The reason we have had to raise taxes right now is, one, we have a huge public debt, part of which represents expenditures that we've already made. So because those expenditures have been made, what it means essentially is that we need the money, and the cabinet secretary has to find reasons, or treasury in general has to find places to get the money.
Okay.
Parliament approved the budget in around about June through the appropriations. The president signed it. So it is not as if Treasury has just come up with something today to try and bamboozle us.
Okay.
Finally, remember the VAT law. One of the first things that actually President Kenyatta achieved was a comprehensive revision of our VAT law, which used to be all over. And he brought them together into one act to modernize Kenya's VAT law. And in that was a proposal, it was that bill in 2013 in which there was a proposal to extend VAT to fuel products. Members of Parliament had public cry and actually suspended that for 3 years. It came out in 2016. In 2016, because the elections were close, members of Parliament decided to suspend it. So when they suspended it, they specifically suspended it and stated that it was going to start on the 1st of September.
Okay.
So because of that, it was going to kick in anyway. When Parliament then passed the law, before the President signs it, it's not law. It's just a bill.
Okay.
So what that means is, for the KRA, they went too quickly. And for the Treasury, they are simply implementing laws that exist. Because we are a nation of laws, that is the situation.
But someone seems to be so sure that the president is going to reverse it. I'd like to talk about that, but let me ask Okiya. You have gone to court about this, but where does the problem lie in your view?
Well, first of all, I agree with the analysis Kwame has given. But for me, the main problem is, even though the implementation date was supposed to be 1st of September, one of the main issues I raised for the interim orders I was seeking is that they have implemented it in the wrong way. They are implementing VAT on the transaction cost, not on the base cost of the fuel. So which means they are paying VAT on the taxes that have been loaded on fuel,
Okay.
which I think to me is immoral. Let alone being unlawful, it's also immoral to do that.
They're taxing a tax.
They're taxing a tax. How do you put VAT on a tax?
Okay.
Those are the issues we are trying to raise.
Okay.
Then secondly, the Constitution is very clear that if you look at Article 129, it talks about the principles of executive power. Is for the benefit of the people. Is to serve the people and for the benefit of the people. So you cannot do anything through executive power that is detrimental to the interests of the people. And we also have a Bill of Rights which guarantees so many things. You know, a tax is basically an infringement of the property rights. And it cannot just be applied arbitrarily. It has to be applied with certain standards. And those standards are set in the Constitution itself, which says if you want to interfere with the rights, these are the minimums you must meet. And if you look at the way the VAT Act addresses the issue of petroleum, it is totally reckless and does not meet the thresholds in the Constitution.
Okay.
And that's why we are asking the courts that it's not just a question of suspending it. It's a question of eradicating it altogether.
Not even rethinking it.
Not even
Let me talk to Kimani Ichung'wa, because when we invited you, a lot of people did not understand. But you are also the chair of the Budget and Appropriation Committee of the National Assembly. So a lot of blame have gone on the National Assembly, and a lot of people are blaming you for passing the law without looking at this. But before we get into that, talk to us where you think there is a miss. Is it the IMF? Is it us? He says it's not the IMF.
I think to a large extent I agree with these two gentlemen, what Kwame says and what Omtatah says, especially on the tax on tax. You cannot impose a tax on another tax. It has to be on the base price, and on that point I do agree with him. The only point of departure with what Kwame says is on what Parliament did or did not do. I'll tell you, way back in 2013 when this VAT Act was passed, it wasn't lost on members of Parliament then, and I was in the 11th Parliament, so I can state that for a fact. I'll not be those among us, those who are now pretending that they were not there and they didn't know what happened. And it wasn't lost on us that it would have a very adverse effect on Kenyans. Way then and even today, it's not lost on us. Therefore, what we did in 2013 is to look at the situation as it were then. And we said we cannot have this law commencing immediately. And it was anticipated that probably by the end, towards the end of 2016, the oil, what was called then the Ali oil from Turkana, would have gone into commercial production, and even if not being able to produce it in a refined state, would be able to at least sell a bit of crude oil. And therefore we hoped that the base prices would be lower, and then by 2016 we would be charging VAT on a lower base. And that is why we deferred implementation to 2016. Come 2016, reality hit us that then we cannot, things haven't changed. Oil prices are still up, and we deferred it by another 2 years to 2018. Truth be told, you have seen by now, at least by 2018, there has been oil in trucks at least. And let us be honest with each other. We all know what happened with the oil pipeline between us, Tanzania and Uganda and the other East African partners in terms of working on the pipeline. We are now having to move this crude oil to Mombasa by trucks.
By trucks.
It's not lost on us that even now, and that is what informed, I believe, the Honorable Junet Mohammed. And we all supported that proposal, the amendment. The amendment, there was nothing wrong. I heard you say in the beginning there was something wrong with the amendment. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the amendment as it was done. Okay. People have blamed Parliament that we did this too late. And
yes, I'd like to talk about that, doing it too late. But I have two concerns. One, you're talking about hope.
Yeah.
Where was this hope pegged? Where were you pegging your hope? And then secondly, you referring to Parliament, and he's given us the time frames of postponement. And I'm reading more of a political season than just hoping that it will happen, and it doesn't happen, so you have to postpone it.
Hope was pegged on two things. One is what government had told us, and all indications were that they would have started working on a pipeline. There will be Ali oil in Turkana, which we hoped was anticipated. Let me not even say hoped. It was envisaged that by then, even if you exported crude oil, then it would in a way help stabilize your foreign exchange rates, and therefore you even be able to import refined fuel cheaper. And therefore, reality today is that we are not there. Therefore, what someone yesterday said is again procrastination, and I said it's really not procrastination. Is hoping that in the next 2 years, the oil from Turkana will have moved, and we'll probably base this on a lower base. Okay. We may disagree on whether it is really necessary to even ever have VAT on fuel, and that is a position that IMF has advanced, that there is need. But I have also maintained that VAT is what you'd call a lazy taxman's tax. It's one of the easiest taxes to collect. And for me, and I think, I don't know if it was off air or on air, someone spoke something about KRA. Our biggest problem in this country
is KRA.
Okay.
It's Omtatah who said that. I'm interested in the cautionary loan of 150 billion shillings, Kwame. I don't get it. I don't get why the government is playing to the gallery of IMF. I mean, this was back in 2013, right? Explain to us why they had to get to this point and what this loan, having in mind that we are in China and we've taken more loan, and apart from that, we have other loans we're servicing. What is behind it?
Okay, first, it's not a loan. What a precautionary facility is to sign an agreement and then to make sure that the IMF puts aside some money so that it's available should we have an economic shock.
Okay.
So if we need foreign exchange very, very quickly, either to stabilize the shilling, or if the central bank needs money to build our foreign reserves, then that we can call upon it.
Okay.
And for you to do that, then they have to, a discussion has to be held to ensure that you're not doing careless things. So one of those is how will you be sure that
at the time it's given out, at the time we need it, it's given out. How do you consider it?
Well, it's like an insurance policy. You're just buying an insurance policy, telling them that keep this money for me, so that when it's required,
just
it is.
In case.
Yes, just in case.
Whose money? Whose money?
Pardon?
Whose money are they keeping for you?
IMF is getting us.
So at the time they give it to you.
They're not giving it. Okay. They're saying it's available for you to call on should you need.
Should you need it?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like buying an insurance policy with your, yes.
Okay.
So now when that happens, it's a prudent thing. That you cannot blame government.
And we have never utilized it.
Yes, precisely. We have never. But it's an important thing for us to do. And I think it is even more important now that we have our debts going where they are, and now most of our debt is actually owed to foreigners and not to ourselves. So if we receive a shock in the Kenya shilling, it would be atrocious. So to have that facility is important. What we shouldn't do is use the IMF as an excuse if we wanted to raise taxes. And I'm thinking, we shouldn't lie to Kenyans. The state of our finances is we are going to have to consider VAT on many more products than we have. That's the truth.
Okay.
Now, whether it has to be at 16% is the point. And our view, when Parliament passed this bill, was, look, don't play games. What we should do, there is nothing that is God-given in the books of economics or from God that says that VAT must be 16. Just stretch it around many more things and bring it back to 11 or 12. There are countries that are bigger than us, Mexico and other places, that run a VAT or equivalent of 8%. So we need money, let's do that. But even if we kick this to 2020, it will not hurt Kenyans less.
Okay.
Kenyans will still have
feel the pinch.
Yes.
And
So we need to
times
be
will
honest
have
with
changed.
ourselves and actually open up that discussion.
So the discussion that we should be having is whether we should have it or not, and not whether we should postpone it or not. Do you agree?
Yes, and in addition to what Honorable Ichung'wa has mentioned,
yes,
it's wrong for the Kenya Revenue Authority and the Energy Regulatory Commission to actually issue prices, right, when they are putting a tax on top of a tax. I mean, it just tells you that if they are managing an important sector in that way, in such a casual manner. And remember, this, they can't blame Parliament, because Parliament has never said that you put a tax on tax. All Parliament says whether this tax applies or not.
But this is a policy that came from Treasury, right? I wouldn't be so rushed to blame the Kenya Revenue Authority.
No, it's the Kenya Revenue Authority that really issued the list.
Yes, but I look at Rotich first, because if Rotich did not insist.
Rotich is a public servant who must obey the Constitution and the law.
Okay.
The law in 2016 upon deferment said that it would start on the 1st.
Or the 1st
when
of
Parliament
September.
passed, yes, when Parliament passed this on a Thursday, the President was away.
Okay.
So when the President is away, that is a bill. It's not a law yet. So if Rotich had said, in fact, I'd have a bigger problem with him if he'd said that we are not implementing it. What power does he have to suspend law? He doesn't. Only Parliament can.
But I think there's that duration after law is passed that the President has time to look at it, right? Before it...
but is that what the President has said he's going to do?
Yes, but
the point Kwame is making is quite true, and that's the facts and truth. One is that even Rotich, just to be the devil's advocate, for CS Rotich, if he was to even defer or purport to defer, he would be doing that against the law.
Precisely.
Unless...
What if he waited for the President?
Let me finish this.
Yes.
Unless the Act as it was crafted in 2013 expressly stipulated that the CS would be the one to determine the date. But once the date has been put in the statute, it becomes that. It's only then Parliament that could defer that from 2013 to 2016. Again, it took Parliament to defer it from 2016 to 2018. And it's now taking Parliament to defer it from 2018 to 2020.
And Parliament did precisely that.
Why Parliament defers it 2020, and I'm not saying that this tax must be there, because I told you, it's a lazy taxman's tax, VAT. And why you do that is allow the country to even have opportunities and stakeholders to interrogate, is this really the best thing that we can do? Whether it's coming from IMF or from our own government or from wherever, we must allow Kenyans to then have an opportunity to be heard. All stakeholders, because what Kwame is saying is true. In terms of the ripple effect of this tax on fuel, it will affect our food prices. It will affect, you can see again in our peculiar, not to say greedy, but our very peculiar habits. Our transporters today, you have heard the gentleman there saying a place he was paying 30 shillings is now being charged 50 shillings, which is almost 100% increment. And therein lies the problem. What that will do is that it will drive up inflation, and everything else, even that precautionary facility that we are hoping to get from the IMF, then we'll have to use it now, because interest will go up, inflation will go up, exchange rates will go up, and our shilling will get very weak, and we will need that precautionary facility, one that we have never required in the last 6 or 7 years.
I'd like to know your view of the fact that there was a time frame, 1st of September. It had to take effect, whichever way you look at it. I'd like to know what your view is, because a lot of Kenyans feel Rotich should have not touched it, and probably it should have taken, the law should have just picked it up, and by 1st of September, it should have been applied, regardless of whether Rotich touched it or not, regardless of whether the president assented to the bill or not.
I think my big problem with the whole thing is that Parliament was trying to play the prophet. They are not prophets.
Okay.
How do you make a law in 2013 and keep on suspending it? As if, you are harassing Kenyans.
You believe it's much more than just suspending it for what
they're not just being serious, and I think the problem lies with Parliament.
Okay.
They should not, if the reasons for which they made the law in 2013 and suspended, it means we can do without it.
Okay.
So if we did it without it for 5 years, I don't see why they left it in our statutes.
Okay.
And for Minister Rotich, there are several ways of looking at it. Because there was a clear expression by Parliament that this law should be suspended. There's a technicality, yes, the bill has not been signed into law, but there's a very clear expression by Parliament and the executive authority. The Constitution, if you go to Article 129, Section 2, and Article 129, Clause 2, yes. If you go there, it clearly states how executive power should be exercised.
Okay.
When the sovereign people have spoken through their MPs that this thing is going to damage the people,
okay,
then we don't just look at the act. We go back to the mother law, the Constitution. What does it say?
Okay.
That executive power must be used for the benefit of the people. If Parliament has spoken and said that this thing is not good, then Rotich should have gone back to the Constitution, not to the Act of Parliament.
Okay.
And the Constitution overrides that Act of Parliament in the sense that he could still not necessarily move with this bill of act.
With respect, that would be a dangerous precedent to set.
I'd like to talk
completely illegal.
I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to talk about that specifically. What other options are available in the face of what he's saying? But we're taking a short break. When we come back, I'd like to talk about Parliament specifically, and more so the reason why a lot of you feel that Parliament actually should have done that long before last week on Thursday. And I also like to talk about the fact that they even thought they could reconvene to discuss this. But first, let's take some feedback, and then we can get back to that with my panel. Right, this is on Twitter. Shari Opio says that Okiya Omtatah is the only independent institution that reflects, advocates, and speaks for both, from both the heart and mind of the citizens. They think Okiya is a sober man. Dennis Okoth says, please, why did the 2013 Parliament suspend this bill instead of removing it completely? Of course, that one you've explained, Honorable Ichung'wa, comprehensively, but we'll still touch on it. And Rono Kipchumba says, 42 lawyers represented Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu last week. Yesterday, only Okiya Omtatah represented the 45 million Kenyans. That has been on the social media the whole day. And do we have one more? All right, we take a break. When we come back, we'll sample much more of your feedback. Also, 20286 is our SMS line. Send your responses. We'd like to know your view on this. We're coming back with my manner. Stay with us.
as members of parliament, we did an amendment which is within our powers and deleted a clause that would have levied 16%.
Sasa wajumbe wawache kwa wanafiki. Wamepewa na katiba vipawa ya kusaidia wananchi. And they must tell the country, they must be very honest. If they pass the 2018-2019 budget, they must tell the country how that budget will be financed.
A good place to begin, Honorable Ichung'wa, you have to tell the country how that budget is going to be financed. Because I think he's mixing two things here, right? Exactly. So explain that to us.
I think we have two very clear options. One, the budget process is about revenues and expenditure. So if we are looking at the revenue side now with the taxes coming in, and I think that's the confusion, I've seen a lot of bashing from people that I passed this budget with this tax, not forgetting that that is a finance committee matter. And what will happen is that if you're not able to raise taxes from one tax, you either become innovative, and that's why I say this, the buck stops actually with KRA, as much as I do hope and I do want to believe that His Excellency the President will agree with Parliament, because Parliament was simply expressing the sovereign will of Kenyan people. And it's my prayer and hope that the President will agree with Parliament and assent to this bill as it were. If whatever happens, either way, we have to relook at our budget. We either go back and get KRA to be more innovative and have other tax measures that would be able to raise adequate revenues. And I'll tell you, Mijungu, KRA and its current management today is very wanting. The levels of tax evasion in this country are extremely high. And it doesn't happen for nothing. It happens with express collusion between revenue officers in KRA, with the knowledge of the top management of KRA. And for me, if you were to ask me, I would definitely fire if I had the powers to fire.
I saw the other day a report that the KRA topman is in office illegally because it's past his time.
Well, Omtatah had been to court on that. I don't know what happened to that case. But it's my considered view, my own personal view, that the top management of KRA has serious problems.
My question before you continue, why is it that you did not realize, sitting in the Budget and Appropriation Committee, why didn't you realize that that section that needed amendment before you passed it as it was?
Let me tell you, what happens in the Budget and Appropriation Committee, we get projected revenues and we get block figures. We are not told that these tax we expect to raise revenues which will be up about 14%. True of the matter is that when they talk about an increment of 14% from the revenues we had last year, it is consistent with the growth in GDP.
Okay.
And they don't narrow it down to tell us that this will come from VAT.
So you wouldn't arrest it. You wouldn't arrest it at that level.
You cannot be able to pick it up.
Okay.
It's only at the finance bill stage that you'll be able to pick up when they come and tell you the tax, the revenue raising measures. We expect to raise this much from this source, this much from this source. I was saying the second bit that we can do is to relook at our expenditure side.
Okay.
Then we would have to look at having a supplementary budget, which is an option that Parliament has, and the executive has to bring a supplementary budget that would cut on to what probably is important but not urgent.
Okay.
There are things that we may find in government they are important to do, but we can postpone them to the next year or the year after.
I'd like to speak to Okiya, but tell me, at the stage where they were debating the budget, why didn't they arrest it?
Who?
The Parliament.
I just told you.
No, on the whole plenary, not only the committee.
Tax revenue raising measures come with the finance bill. The finance bill is discussed around this time of the year, between the months of July and
that's when they can
early. Actually, this is the first finance bill that has been passed before September.
Okay.
Ordinarily, finance bills are passed in September, but because of the way the calendar was scheduled for Parliament this year, we had to do it much earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the problem is that Parliament has failed to accord with Article 221 of the Constitution, which lays out how the estimates have to be approved, and then it has also ceded too much power to the executive. Like this year, and I think the MP will bear me out, the appropriations bill, which the Constitution requires that should come out of the estimates that have been approved by Parliament, was introduced in Parliament alongside the estimates. So you find that, and I've got the dates, and I've got the facts, because so when the appropriations bill was introduced by the minister, what estimates was he using to develop the appropriations bill? Then you come down to the question of the Finance Act. In the old tradition, we used to separate the Finance Act because you had that old law that allowed them to have some prospective taxes. But right now, under Article 221, the finance bill should be accompanying the estimate, so that because when the cabinet secretary presents the estimates, he's not like the registrar of the High Court or like the or like the Parliamentary Service Commission. The minister is the only one who is allowed to introduce revenue estimates. And I think the revenues include taxes.
Okay.
So the revenue estimates should be what is in the finance bill. Part of it should be placed in Parliament at the same time. This idea of saying that you approve the budget, and then you have the question Honorable Dwale is asking, that you have approved the budget, how are you going to finance it? Putting the cart before the horse.
I don't even think we should go to what Dwale is saying, because I believe Dwale is mixing issues totally and throwing off Kenyans.
No, but what he's saying...
Dwale and I tend to disagree to a large extent. One, it's not true, Omtatah, that the estimates came together with the appropriations bill. It is not true because we
have an affidavit by the minister in the case I filed. He raised that he gave an affidavit having presented the
I don't know about the affidavits, but I'm just telling you what happens and what actually happened this year, because I am the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee and can tell you for a fact that when the estimates came, and they come, I think 60 days before the end of the financial year, that's in June, around April. And we have at least 2 months to consider those estimates, after which the appropriations bill is prepared on the basis of the adopted Budget and Appropriations Committee report that is passed by Parliament. And that's what happened this year. On the question of whether you can be able to bring the finance bill together with the estimates, I think, again, because the estimates come much earlier in the year, after public participation by the National Treasury and all that, we also, as Parliament, have to give time for public participation. The National Treasury then has to do their revenue raising measures. You know now, because of the East African Community agreements that they have to do their revenue raising measures. What was initially used to be called the budget statement is now just a revenue raising measures policy statement. Okay. And that they do in consultation with the other East African countries. And they have an agreement that they will do it together, I think the first Thursday or Tuesday or something in June. And that's why they are not able to bring them together. So it's only after that policy statement on revenue raising measures then that the cabinet secretary is able to draw up the finance bill and bring his revenue raising measures.
Before you come, what is the validity of that agreement? Can a treaty override the constitution? That agreement with other partners, there's a very clear timeline in Article 221 of the constitution on how we should handle the estimates and appropriations bill and what have you. Why should that thing emasculate us and treat within the East African community? We have a constitution.
So, to you, we should go back to a constitution each time we have a dispute.
A treaty is being made by politicians.
Yes.
They cannot override the constitution made by the people.
Let me bring in Kwame.
Yes.
Kwame.
I think the first thing is, it's true. There's nothing in the constitution that forbids the the cabinet secretary from bringing in the finance bill as the appropriations are being considered. Because one of the decisions Parliament should be making is, if you're going to approve this expenditure and this item and that item, how is it going to be financed? So in a way, I think that might require, there may be that burden with the synchronizing across the East African community, but I don't think that should override any other practical measures that are required to ensure that the Parliament is given the best position to make a decision on appropriations or expenditure together with the budget. But if you look at the budget policy statement, which is also presented to Parliament quite early and all that, usually within it you can see a summary of the fiscal policy that government proposes, that the executive actually proposes. So it's not exactly an ambush when the finance bill then comes in. Okay. So it's just about cleaning up those facts. I agree with Okiya that Parliament should not use as an excuse the fact that we consider the budget policies, the finance bill, much later after we've approved the appropriations.
Okay, and of course you're here to defend that.
I had to get the constitution from you and read this, that at least 2 months before the end of each financial year, the cabinet secretary responsible for finance shall submit to the National Assembly estimates of the revenue and expenditure of the national government for the next financial year.
Yes, that's approximately April.
Yes. Yeah, April.
Yes. But the Finance Act has 30th of April as the deadline.
As the
deadline. Public management.
Therefore, let me say, in terms of what Parliament would or cannot do. And I told you, this is the first time that Parliament has been able to enact the finance bill way before September. Ordinarily, it usually comes around September because we have, I think, 90 days after it's submitted to the House to consider it and pass it.
Okay.
And therefore, this time it came in early. So it's just unfortunate that these dates kind of overlapped, and the Cabinet Secretary's hands were tied. And we're just discussing when we were off here during the break, what happens then if, just in case His Excellency the President assents to this bill?
I'm going to talk about that. But first, there's something that is emerging, and I'm just wondering, because Parliament has been accused to be very weak, not doing its work and all. I want us to listen to this bite from the Majority Leader and then come back to this discussion.
Until the President is presented with this law, Kenyans have no choice. They have to pay the 16%.
This is one time that we must raise to the occasion and make sure that we side with the people this time.
And now they want to tax the common man by increasing petroleum prices so that the common man can bear the burden of their responsibility. We are saying no. We are saying that the 16% VAT on fuel must be stood down.
The soundbite I'm looking at is the one that Duale says parliamentarians are deluded to think that they can bring back this bill to be discussed. They're writing a letter to me to convene Parliament. I mean, how do they even reason like that? Let me ask you, you're sitting in Parliament. I know you didn't write the letter, but how would they reason like that? Is that the reason why this Parliament has been faulted?
Let me say, with all due respect to some of my colleagues, I also watched on our station a member of Parliament attempt to explain himself out of the situation. And I think we're just being dishonest, some of us. We must own up to the problem as it is, and look for solutions. And I think that's what a majority of us did in the House when Junet Mohammed's amendment was supported. Owning up that there is indeed a problem, that we cannot have this tax at this particular time, and get a solution to it. Purporting that you write to the Majority Leader, you don't even write to the Majority Leader if you want to convene. You write to the Speaker. Yes, anyway, it could be, I don't know who that Member of Parliament is. Let me just assume he's a first-time Member of Parliament who doesn't know the procedure.
Okay. Or a member of Parliament who is concerned with what's happening and thought there could be a solution from Parliament, right?
What further solution if you're a serious
member of Parliament would you? I agree with you.
Do you need, unless you were not in the House on Thursday when this amendment was passed?
And it was already
because it's already been done. The ball now is in the court of His Excellency the President. He assents to the bill, then we see what happens after that. And that's a question I think someone was asking when we were off here. What happens?
I want to talk about
the way it is in statute is that whatever taxes that you have paid from the time Parliament passes a resolution to the time the President assents to the bill, the tax you have paid in between is refundable.
All right.
You can claim it back. The only danger with that is with a tax like this, it's only maybe the oil marketers will be able to reclaim this tax. That ordinary mwananchi who is paying bus fare that is more than what he usually pays, someone who buys bread or unga whose price had gone up will not be able to claim this back unless you're able to claim your VAT. You have your tax receipts with the VAT amount on it.
Okay. I want to talk about that extensively because I want to bring the human rights angle, because a lot of Kenyans have also cried and said, why don't you do this? Because they foresaw what's going to happen. But before then, I still want to go back to Parliament. And this is what Honorable Moses Kuria posted. And I want you gentlemen to either agree or find something inside his statement. Now, Moses Kuria posted on his Facebook page this. I'm just going to read part of it. I am a member of the Budget and Appropriation Committee in the National Assembly of the Republic of Kenya. I voted to approve our budget of 3 trillion shillings plus. I'm also a member of the Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Public Works Committee. In fact, I'm the vice chair there. I voted wholeheartedly to approve 179 billion shillings to build better roads, 58 billion shillings for SGR from Nairobi to Naivasha, more billions for affordable housing under the Big Four agenda. I gave you money to complete your stall markets, run universal healthcare, complete 58 irrigation dams that are underway, etc. You never faulted me. It did not bother you whether or where I would get the money from. You even applauded me. I cannot therefore turn around and start crying with you about the VAT on fuel. I will be pretending. Kindly ask John Badi, who is the minority leader, who sits with me in the budget committee, to shut up and wipe out the crocodile tears. Tell all those pretentious leaders to man up or woman up and stop treating Kenyans like fools. Your reaction, let me begin with you.
My reaction, I go back to the Constitution.
Yes.
If you look at Honorable Kuria, what were they appropriating? Because the Appropriations Act was passed much earlier. You are appropriating is sharing the money. Okay? How do you appropriate what you don't have? And if you look at that section of the final 221, I think it's a sabbatical 6 of 221, deals with appropriations. So after the estimates are approved and whatever, then now Parliament prepares the appropriation, then the act is passed and the President assents to it. And if you go to 222, it says if Parliament fails to do the appropriations, the previous year's appropriations will apply. You see?
Yes.
So now you find our Parliament here goes ahead, passes the budget. That's an appropriation, but there's got no money that's appropriating. Then it now comes with the finance bill afterwards.
But that's what happens. I mean, you have to budget and know where you're going to get your money from.
You must know where the money is coming from.
Before you budget for it?
Before you budget for it. But here they budget for it. Then they now begin fighting.
Where do we get this money
where do we get this money from?
Okay.
Because if they were going to look for that money first, then they would not approve a very ambitious budget without knowing where the money is going to come from.
To an extent, if you allow me, before I lose that point, to an extent, Omtatah is right. That at the time you're appropriating, you must know where the money is coming from. And I didn't make that point. That what the National Treasury brings in are estimates of revenue and expenditure. Okay. Those estimates are based on a certain criteria. And if you ask them, they'll tell you that we have based our revenue estimates based on the estimated growth in GDP, and that's why I say their growth of revenues was based on was consistent with the 14% growth in GDP. Therefore, without really drilling into say that this will come from this particular tax and this other particular tax, because again, in line with this constitution, and Omtatah will be the first man to go to court if we do not have public participation on all these issues. Therefore, if there is a proposed tax measure and we have not gone back to the public, Omtatah will be the first guy to go to court.
No, I'll not go to court because
you will.
No. Because Article 22(1) Section 5 says when the estimates have come, invite the public. Within that particular section, that is taken care of, public participation. So that issue would not arise.
Estimates or even on the tax measures?
Of course, if you bring in the estimates and you bring in the finance bill at that time, those tax measures will be considered. Then when you are going to do the appropriation, you do a neat job. Other than appropriating like you are shooting in the dark, then you come here and then begin saying now the budget is not balancing. We must look for money.
I mean, the tradition of appropriations in Kenya, and it's not inconsistent with our constitution, is that whenever the appropriations bill is passed by Parliament or approved, right? Waiting for the President's signature. It is assumed that authority is given to the Treasury to spend at least 50% of the money. So for that reason, it's the right thing. There's no contradiction in terms of that. What the contradiction is after Parliament considers, as it should, considers the finance bill and decides that some taxes are not off. That's the signal to the Cabinet Secretary, or Parliament itself should take its own motion and say, now what are we going to cut? What I think is bothers us here is that Parliament nevertheless seems to be telling the Treasury and the Executive, you guys take care of yourselves, but don't tax our people. Where is it going to get? It is also irresponsible for members of Parliament to say, not the one who's present with us, but some of them are saying that, including some senators, showing that they're poorly advised by saying, let's put these taxes somewhere where they'll not hurt. There's no tax that doesn't hurt. There isn't. All taxes, if we have to raise that 70, 80 billion, somebody is going to have less income in order to be able to pay for that tax. So it gets us, we are on the sharp edge of the point where we are saying, the problem here is not even the tax itself. The problem here is expenditure. We are spending so much that we actually have no choice, but now we've taxed everything
for more money,
and we're now going back into fuel.
Look for more money. We're time to take another short break. When we come back, and I like to talk about the other options that are available. Plus, there are people who believe in this country that we must do what we're doing, otherwise we'll never progress, right? So I'll come back with that discussion. But first, before we take a break, we promise to take some feedback from you. Let's see what you have to say about this. That's Julius Mnasi says, MPs are shouting and displaying their hypocrisy out here, must be reminded to go back in the Parliament and legislate the laws that are meaningful to the electorate. The mess Kenyans are in today lies between Parliament and the executive. That's Julius Mwasi. From Dennis Busolo says, in summary, Omtatah has taught the following how to do their jobs: CS Rotich, KRA, ERC, and Parliament. I'd like to talk about briefly the suggestion that they can impeach Rotich. I don't know how I'll draw you into that conversation. It's just a suggestion. Let me see the last one, if we still have. All right, those are the ones we have. There's one more from JK Nyingi, listening to Okiya Omtatah Kili, and this man has the gift of intuition. Extremely brilliant. Okay, Omtatah, it's your day. All right, let's take a break. I'd like to come back and discuss that plus other factors and also try and draw you into that conversation of impeachment. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
bid to push that for the next 2 years, Lide exposes the 79 billion deficit that will be there. And the question of how much more than the country can do, and the issue of debt. Kenyans can't aspire for greatness, for a globally competitive country without willing to pay for it. Essentially what we are seeing is the cost of transformation. We can't wish and enjoy a ride on the standard gauge railway ride, and we are not willing to tighten our belts. It is essentially a chicken-egg position. A lot of wisdom will be required for the country to resolve these issues the right way, not the emotional way. And it's not really a question of interest. It's what is that which is good for us as a people, as a community, as a society that has aspirations and dreams, and what prices and sacrifices do we need to make to achieve our dreams and aspirations as a people. As a generation, we may need to pay a bigger price for our children. We can't keep on postponing. We'll say we'll postpone the VAT on fuel for 2 years, but what will happen?
Right. I have picked a few things. Cost of transformation. You cannot enjoy this without sacrificing. It's a chicken egg situation. Kenyans will need a lot of wisdom to resolve this. Let me begin from an economist perspective. I know you're an accountant. I come to you.
Yeah.
What James Mwangi is talking about does not cohere with a lot of Kenyans. Actually, Kenyans don't care. Omtatah just joked and said he's a well-fed man. Now we're thinking of the people on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think that one of the things we need to dissociate with due respect to a very successful business person in Kenya is just because you run a very successful financial house doesn't make you a brilliant economist. I think I say that with respect. It is clear that Kenyans understand at their own personal levels that, look, this will pinch our income substantially. That not stated, James Mwangi is also right in the sense that I think it's just the tone that looks patronizing. But James Mwangi is right in saying that, look, we should not play around by shuffling. You know, if you shuffle cards from one pocket to the other, it doesn't mean it. Yes. Yeah. So if you're going to raise these taxes, let's face Kenyans. Let's tell them why we need to raise taxes, and it's clear why. We have baked into the pie expenditures starting with 400 billion, 500 billion last year, 800 billion of deficits. So the time is coming now, and the Pied Pipers come. We need to pay our way out. So what he's saying is, let's all be honest with each other.
Yes.
Some of this money was taken. I don't agree with him that the standard gauge railway is a magical thing. It's not going to be, but we'll still see that. But the point he's making for us is, look, we actually have to accept that most of Kenya will be built off our taxes.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it can be done through taxes that aren't popular.
But coming from him, because you can't ignore the person who is giving you or expressing himself in that way. You can't ignore it.
Well, you know, I mean, now that you mention it, let's talk about it. He runs a financial house, right? If he thinks that it's a big deal, he should lend government the money. But he's not.
If he's able to lend the money.
Yeah, he should lend government the money for it, but he's not. So he's asking government instead to tax and to construct huge, he talked about the standard gauge railway. We had to borrow 327 billion from the Chinese. If he thinks it was a brilliant idea, I'm sure he has significant connections. He could have put together a consortium of Kenyan businessmen and given that money to government.
Okay.
But the risk is huge. And it's very clear when the risk is huge, you pass it on to the government and then you speak
I'm
about
still looking at the long-term benefits that he's speaking about and just trying to deliberately ignore
our problem and the reason the
sections.
treasury is in trouble is that it's not as if we are being asked to raise 70 billion. And 70 billion in the scheme of things is not necessarily chicken feed, but it's not little money, but it's not the biggest. There are things for which we've paid as the public over the last 5-6 years that are not showing us those returns.
Okay.
So it's not just about the fact that every time government wants to spend money, we must spend it. No, people have a right to ask, where has it gone to? And so far, some of the biggest ones, whether it's the extension of power, we extended the last mile quite a bit. It did not generate money. We used 24 billion shillings on laptops. They're now being used to run musical bars somewhere around our borders. We also spent some money extending the last mile. We have constructed a railway line and many other things. Not all of them have paid off.
Okay.
And I think that's the pressure Kenyans feel.
Okay. Listening to James Mwangi, and of course I'm more concerned with the long-term cost benefit of what we're doing. Is it necessary right now for Kenyans to tighten the belts?
I'm really surprised that it came from him. because I think he's one man, given the kind of enterprise he runs, that will not need the tightening of the belt. He will not make those big profits they make. But more important is the abuse of the taxes that are raised. Even this money, the crunch within which the government is in, there has been reckless borrowing that is not making returns on investment, pilferage. I think the official statement in this country that 30% of the budget, today at the current budget, 30% is about 500 billion. So 70 billion into 500 billion, if we just cleaned up this budget and tightened it, we would save 500 billion shillings, and we don't have to tax Kenyans kill Kenyans with 70 billion. So I think that a lot of things need to be done. And again, the blame goes back to Parliament in terms of not acting, first of all, not thinking through the budgets well, and they just keep on approving these very big mega structures. They keep on raising the bar for borrowing, and then they give government a free hand to misbehave. And then you go to the issue of the reports of the Auditor General. Very many things come from the Auditor General's office, but they are hardly followed up by Parliament to make sure that we have got an accountable way of handling our money.
But even if Parliament does a good report, sometimes it's not even given the force its name.
No, the
so
power Parliament has.
I don't agree with you.
The power Parliament has is awesome. Yes. Parliament can sack the president. Let's face it. Parliament can sack Uhuru Kenyatta today. So we cannot say that Parliament has got no power.
But in the reports they do, like I'm looking at the report on NYS 1, nothing really happened.
No, but it was Parliament's fault. Look, NYS...
It was Parliament's fault,
yes.
With all this far-reaching...
Yes, 8. Look, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, NYS budget, the entire NYS was 800 million.
Yes, it went to 2.5.
It went to 4 billion. It went to 12. Right now, I think it's about 21, 22 and something. So how do you continue to raise appropriations and give money to an institution that is allowing semi-literate girls to carry 60 kilograms of cash off a bank? It's Parliament's fault. If you're not punishing wrongdoing, you are actually incentivizing theft.
Okay.
With all honesty, Mijungu, I will tell you, indeed, we have not done the very best that we could. But I'll tell you, things have changed. Beginning this year, I'll tell you, the Budget and Appropriation Committee made sure that if you had an adverse Auditor General's report on prudence in utilization of public funds, that you are punished for it. That is how NYS lost money this year.
Is that how the judiciary lost money for development?
I will also tell you, and it's a discussion I've had even with His Lordship, the Chief Justice, that indeed there are questions on utilization of public funds in the judiciary. There are questions on even absorption of their development expenditure. And we made sure that we had a very objective criteria on how and where we cut.
Okay.
Based on prudence in utilization of public funds in terms of the Auditor General's reports, to even utilization of your either your recurrent or development expenditure. Therefore, in the past, it has not been that way. Okay. But I'll tell you, this 12th Parliament has not just been responsive to what the people are saying in terms of even what they have done with this VAT Act, but even in our relevant departmental committees, be it the Budget and Appropriations or the other departmental committees, we have ensured that we hold government to account.
Okay.
One of the things that I will tell you, and something Omtatah was speaking to, is even on things to do with public participation. We realize that when we set out to do public participation in April, May, it really doesn't add much value to the budget making process. And we have since changed that, and we have embarked on a process where we will now have public participation way before. And that's what Omtatah was saying, even for the National Treasury, nothing stops them from bringing their budget estimates in December or in January. They don't have to wait until April. And slowly we are moving towards that. In the past, we've never had a framework or a mechanism on how Parliament oversights the budget implementation cycle. Beginning next week, we are retreating as a Budget and Appropriations Committee to finalize on a framework on budget implementation oversight, because it's not something that has been haphazard. And actually what Parliament has done in the past is to firefight. When there's a crisis, and then NYS, it's the Public Accounts Committee that comes in to now look at post-mortem what really happened and where did this money get lost. Now we want to capture this now before at the end of every quarter be able to look at the budget implementation cycle, how much was appropriated to you, how much has been released to you in terms of exchequer, how have you utilized that amount. Okay. Therefore, Parliament is a growing democracy, and I think with time we'll get to where ideally we ought to be, but one step at a time, but we are getting there.
Okay. You're getting there. Okay, looking at the steps they've taken, what captures my attention is the fact that he said Parliament has been operating haphazardly, no proper framework, and they're retreating to do it.
My hope springs eternal. So I believe that I think I'm hearing good things. That's the other man I think we've really been trying to fight for. That Parliament has been given a whip. For heaven's sake, crack it. Crack the whip.
But do you believe Parliament is truly independent to crack the whip?
Why not?
They get you get direction from the executive.
I am a member of Parliament elected on the Jubilee ticket.
Yes.
And I will tell you for a fact, when I contributed to the debate on this finance bill, I did allude to the fact that there was a case for deferment of this VAT tax. And indeed, hundreds of Jubilee members of Parliament did support that amendment, which in the past, something that came from Junet Mohammed being minority whip.
They would not have done it.
They would not have done it.
Okay, because
that's why I told you,
because it pinned everyone.
Of Parliament, give them credit. Give them
because it pinned everyone. Because it pinned your constituents. Because you know you'll go to the ground.
Well, of course, it pinned everyone. And members of Parliament are elected to represent people in Parliament.
Exactly, and that's the same way.
And that's the same way. I will speak for government when it's necessary to speak for government.
And that's the same way you join hands.
That I am elected
to represent
people
of Kikuyu.
The people of Kikuyu are my boss number one.
Yes.
The correct position is like this. The Honorable here was elected by the people of Kikuyu to be a member of Parliament in the Republic of Kenya. Is the Parliament of Kenya
was sent to Parliament.
He's an MP of not of Kikuyu constituency. He's an MP of Kenya, and when he's in that house, I expect him to look at things in terms of representing Kenya.
The whole nation.
The people become Kenyans. And whatever is good for Kenyans is good for Kikuyu.
Okay. But the fact, what I was going to ask him, just like they joined hands in passing this or getting this amendment to go through, it's the same way they join hands when there's something that actually applies across the board, like in the recent past is increasing their salary. So this was good for them.
What salary?
No, not now. I said the recent past. This was just good for them. It wasn't. If it wasn't good for you, perhaps you'd have not supported Junaid Mohammed
in the 9th Parliament.
Yes.
In the 9th and 10th Parliament.
Even the 11th Parliament. You almost impeached SRC chairperson, Sarah Saddam, 11th Parliament.
Yes. The problem we have with our Parliament, and from both sides, is that we do not have political parties. We have got vehicles that big men used to get to power, and if you bought that vehicle to go to power, they expect some loyalty from you, or you can suffer some dire consequences. So I think that one of the issues that to liberate Parliament from that executive control or controlled by external forces, we need to address the issue of party politics in this country, which might be a long thing. But the day when we get a party where the Honorable here can be...
A party like Jubilee.
Whichever it is. The day we get a party, I don't know what Jubilee is, but the day you get a party that can allow people between elections to function, not a party that comes up at the time of elections, but a party that works on policy issues between elections.
We cannot go there. We'll take the whole night.
You know, like every Kenyan, I'm very worried about the effectiveness of Parliament. Because, you see, Parliament has three main functions. One is legislation. The other is oversight over the executive and institutions in the country. And the final one is, legislation, oversight, and representation. And the one area in which all those three functions converge is in budget policy. So if Parliament did well there, to be honest, they'd have done some 60–70% of their work effectively. But they haven't done that. So for instance, right now we are dealing with taxation. And if you see taxation on fuels, it is not that Kenyans don't want to be taxed on fuels. Kenyans want to pay effective taxes, and they're telling you through the protests, or at least the representation you've received, that we think that our taxes are too high. What they're saying is government is too big. So the idea that we should pay for anything provided we can get taxes from Kenya is one thing. Parliament should help, but actually your primary function is to make sure that government is sufficiently small to do the things that government can do very well. And you should not be unhappy. I mean, you should not be scared to actually close certain things that government is doing really, really badly. So, for instance, we have something called the Kenya Meat Commission, which has been fed with a lot of money over the years, and it doesn't do better than a simple butchery run by gentlemen who wake up at 4 a.m. to actually slaughter goods somewhere in Marikiti or in Dagoretti.
Except this year.
But you're giving this, yes.
This year.
But these guys always, I know, but these guys always get billions. Yes,
Okay.
this year they didn't get, but they always get money. In fact, my view is don't just say you won't give them money, close them effectively. Just tell the executive, we want you to close these things, sell it out to somebody who can run a butchery well enough. There's no reason for the government of Kenya to run a butchery.
Like myself.
Okay.
I've done that for many years.
All right. Mheshimiwa Ichung'wa, I've just seen very interesting thread here from Gadara, who is a regular in our, he's a regular in our program. So I'd just like to read 3 of them, then we respond in relation to how we got here. I just think it's necessary. So the first one, he says, Kimani Ichung'wa should not be allowed to get away with falsehoods. There was never any likelihood that Turkana oil will be produced in 2016. That's where we started, right? Nor that it will reduce the cost of the local fuel. Kenya has no refinery. We will export it and continue to import refined fuel. We have one in Changamwe, though. Or was it closed down? Obsolete. Okay. Then he says the second one, selling crude oil is in the relatively small amounts we will produce will do nothing to the exchange rate of fuel costs. Further profit from early oil will, in quotes, will first go to reimburse Talo for its exploration expenditure. Government of Kenya won't get money from the exports for a while. That's the second point. And then he said, in fact, this will be an excellent opportunity to ask Ichung'wa why Parliament is demanding that the profit-sharing agreement between Government of Kenya signed with Talo is made public, so we can see exactly how the money that is made from oil exports is to be shared. Right?
The last one I may not be competent enough
to answer that.
I don't sit in the energy committee, so
you wouldn't know the sharing.
On the,
we know the percentages, though, right?
Profit sharing formula, and I've not been involved in the discussions so far.
Okay.
Maybe somebody in the energy committee would be better placed to answer that question.
Okay.
But on the first one,
yes.
I'll tell you for a fact that indeed what was said then from the energy ministry, from the national treasury, is that they had envisaged by 2016. Actually, I think towards end of 2015, 2016, there would be early oil. And give credit where it's due, because at least by the end of 2016, they had started putting the oil, I think, in drums in Turkana. It's not until this year, was it this year or late last year?
The president flagged it off.
That they flagged it off.
That
Remember
was
the problems
yes.
that have been there throughout that period with the
security
abandoning of the oil, the pipeline. There was also talk of doing a refinery, I think, in Lamu under the LAPSET program, which is yet to kick off. Therefore, a lot of water has passed under the bridge, and therefore, I'm just being honest, saying what informed the 11th Parliament in passing this VAT Act then, and what informed our deferment to a time when we envisaged that prices would be low. I don't think Gadara is being sincere, and besides not being an economist, I'm an accountant. I'm only faithful to 2 things, but I'm also a student of economics. My degree was in economics and history. But I trained as an accountant. Accountants are only faithful with 2 things: the truth, rather facts and figures. And it's a fact of life, and Kwame will tell you. If you're able to export even 20 barrels, at least it's an export that will bring in your foreign exchange in dollars or in pounds and in euros. That will mitigate against your shilling, and your shilling will become much stronger. Therefore, those are facts in economics that I don't need to argue with Gadara, I think, who is a journalist.
Okay.
I can argue with Kwame and other economists, but not with Gadara.
Okay, so to sorted, unless you want to add something about what he says, that's okay? Okay, that's okay?
On my part, I would say that going back to the issue at hand, the Principal Secretary for Energy today wrote a letter to the Principal Secretary in the Treasury, Mr. Kwame Owino, telling him that they have gone about it the wrong way, that they are charging VAT on taxation, on fuel, tax, or fuel that has already been taxed, that contains other taxes. And he's saying that that thing is wrong. So I hope that Kwame Owino, Dr. Kwame Owino will respond accordingly to how the Energy PS has directed or advised, and do the right thing. So that even if they are implementing this VAT, implement it the correct way. Don't implement it the wrong way. Don't take 10 shillings out of, instead of the 1 shilling you're entitled to.
Okay.
Maybe Mijungu, if you allow me, since Omtatah is here and I hardly get to see him other than in the courts, and he's public litigant #1, maybe the next people you should take to court are those people who are also taking advantage of this measure to exploit Kenyans. For instance, when a matatu that was charging 300 shillings from Nairobi to Nakuru moves that to 500 shillings. I mean, it's the same arithmetic you're saying. At most, you'd have expected that the increment in fuel prices would at most have been about 9 shillings, at most, per litre. So now I think we're talking about 12 shillings on super petrol.
Yes.
12 shillings on super petrol on full tank. Ordinary cars about 40-50 litres is about 600 shillings. So even if someone has had to fill his tank to transport people from Nakuru to Nairobi,
he's adding
at an extra 600 shillings, what's the basis of increasing that by 200 shillings?
And spreading
I think
it
it's
across.
those peculiar, what Michael Joseph called peculiar, what I would call greed among Kenyans. And we tend to take advantage of each other by all means. Tomorrow I'll tell you, those of us in the meat industry like myself, have had no increment really in terms of movement of cattle, because most of the cattle we get from Kajiado and Narok are pushed on foot through Kibiko to Dagoretti.
Okay.
But we increase our meat prices maybe by 50 or 80 or 100 shillings.
Okay.
We're not being honest with each other also, and I think that's why we hurt
And
each other.
another thing, I think they should have spread it across the board. I mean, divide the percentage and spread it. Yeah. It will have minimal impact. Gentlemen, I'd like to end this program with asking you for the solutions and looking forward, and specifically what happens if the president does or does not. I'd like to end with that. But first, we have a segment on Sidebar called the Toon Side. This is the cartoon. We picked one for this week. I'd like you to take a look at it, and then you give me your perspective on this. This is one of the biggest topics last week, the arrest and detention, and of course the decision to prosecute the DCJ. We know where the case is currently, but that's a number of people. The most interesting person there, we know about video assistant referee on Mwilu's case, is the judiciary, looking at what's going to happen. They're looking at the court to know what's going to happen to one of them. I don't know what you think. Let me begin with Kwame.
Well, I think it just tells us that I guess this was in light of the fight against corruption, which is necessary. I'm not too sure whether the choice and the full implication of how this, because this is the second highest office within the judiciary, right? And so if you're going to investigate and put her back before her juniors to prosecute her, it required a little bit more thinking than it seems to have done, because then we ended up with a very awkward situation in which it wasn't clear what's supposed to be done and whether anyone has jurisdiction over the DCJ one way or the other. So yes, that's a decision that's actually led us to understand some of the contradictions that exist in the law, but also in the approach that was taken by the DPP's office.
Okay. You are always in court. In fact, last week, I had one of the members of Parliament, Peter Kaluma, who's a lawyer. He said right here that he should be given a honorary degree in law from somewhere. All right, but your view of what's happening?
First of all, let us look at our institutions. And me, in this particular case, I'm with the DPP 100%. Article 157 of the Constitution is very clear on the powers of the DPP. So to tell us that the DPP, when going after a judge, should first of all defer to the Judicial Service Commission, when we are told that the DPP, the Constitution is very clear, that it should take instructions from no one or from anywhere. So to me, if the DPP feels he has got evidence against somebody, let him go after that somebody, let him produce him in court, and let that person defend themselves. There's a presumption of innocence. Let the people defend themselves, and if the evidence is not enough, they'll be acquitted.
But when the DCJ sits in subordinate court, the magistrate's court, as a DCJ, because she hasn't resigned. In fact, she's working. She attended the Judicial Service Commission meeting last week. I mean, what does that do to the institution?
You see, being a DCJ does not, or a CJ does not confer immunity.
No, forget about immunity. I'm talking about the institution of the judiciary. Sitting there in the dock.
A judge is not the judiciary. A judge is not the judiciary. Be it the Chief Justice, be it whatever, is just a citizen like you.
When you see the DCJ, what do you see?
Pardon?
Do you see Philomena Mwilu, or do you see a judge of the Supreme Court of Kenya?
I see a judge of the Supreme Court of Kenya who is
so
bound,
when you take him to the subordinate court,
who is bound and you know, they enjoy some privileges.
Yes.
They are not rights.
Which is
they
okay.
Are privileges.
Okay.
And those privileges cannot stand in the course of law enforcement.
Okay.
So me, I believe that tying the hands of the DPP is a very dangerous thing we are doing in this country.
We're not tying the hands. Let me give you an example. In 2014, if I'm right, when President Uhuru Kenyatta went to The Hague for the last time, was it 2014 or 2015 when he was acquitted, right? He had to sort of relinquish his position as the president. So when he appeared at The Hague, he was Uhuru Kenyatta and not the president of Kenya, right? When Uhuru Kenyatta is outside there, you see him as president or you see him as Uhuru Kenyatta. When the DCJ is in the dock, how do you see?
That was just a political statement. The president took an oath. When he was there, he was still under that oath he had taken. We never unoathed him. He never went to the Supreme
But how
Court
do you see him?
to unoath, then go to The Hague, then come back and take the oath back.
Okay, talk to me about the
He was there as the
institution.
president of Kenya, and all these things is just PR. So the issue of the DCJ, the DCJ could simply have stepped out of her work.
Okay.
Without resigning, just stepped aside and then gone through the process of being cleared.
Which is okay from her side, but from the side of the DPP, there is the constitution and there is a way you remove a judge, right?
No, you see, removing a judge and putting a judge on trial are two different things. They're not trying to remove her.
I think Mijungu,
Yes.
even with the parallel you drew with President Uhuru Kenyatta's arraignment at The Hague, it is Uhuru Kenyatta who was the accused, not the president of the Republic of Kenya.
Okay.
In the same breath, it is Philomena Mbete Mwilu who is accused in that particular case, not the Deputy Chief Justice. And I think is testament to the maturity of our democracy and how well our systems are working, our institutions independently are working. The judiciary is allowed to function independently. The executive does its work independently. Parliament is doing its work independently. And the office of DPP is doing its work independently.
Okay.
But I think the only thing we need to ensure that we do as a country is that we support the fight against corruption. And I remember during the State of the Nation address this year, His Excellency the President did state and ask Parliament, well, asking Parliament and all other institutions, including the judiciary, to support the fight against corruption. He said that there shall be no sacred cows. And indeed, that is what I would want to see. Whether be it in the judiciary, be it in Parliament, I've seen even members of Parliament being arrested and arraigned in court. They're not arraigned as members of Parliament.
They're arraigned as
in
individuals.
individual capacities.
Okay.
Therefore, we should not draw too much reference to one particular person or one particular institution. Let's allow the judiciary to be,
which is okay,
and
but
also allow the DPP to exercise in
but the
independence.
the difference. Okay, just a moment. The difference is this is the judge of a superior court, the Supreme Court, right? You're taking her before a judge of a subordinate court or magistrate's court. That is the only issue.
It is the same thing when a policeman arrests another policeman for a crime committed.
But you don't take them before a policeman.
But you have to arrest them.
Yes, but you don't take them before.
The same way there's nobody else to arrest you, is the same way there's no other judiciary to be charged before.
No, but then that's the reason why there's a way you remove the judge or you begin the process. Take them through the Judicial Service Commission. Judicial Service Commission will receive that memorandum from the DCI stating these are the accusations. Then they look at it, form a committee. If it merits, they forward it back to the CJ. The Chief Justice takes it to the President.
But you forget in 2015 we enacted a law that we call the Fair Administrative
I know, I'm just talking about this particular situation.
The issue is,
Yes.
there is precedence.
Yes.
When Justice GBM Karaoke was accused of knifing somebody, didn't he appear before a magistrate?
I remember
Didn't he he was a judge of a court of appeal.
Yes.
Did he appear before a magistrate? Did it cause any problems? Didn't he appear before on appeal before a high court judge?
Okay.
So the issue is,
okay,
let us distinguish between respect and fear.
Okay.
We respect the judges, but we don't fear them by any iota.
All right.
And if they think they're sacred cows, then they'll better listen to the English saying that says, sacred cows make the sweetest hamburger.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, let's conclude this, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to conclude this. I'm looking at it, we have about 3 minutes on the clock at most. I'm looking at it in terms of what happens if President Uhuru does or doesn't. Where do I start? Let me start from Kwame.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, if he does, then obviously we
in terms of the ripple effect to Kenyans. Yes.
Okay. If he signs the bill into law, then it becomes effective on the date that he signs it. What then happens is that yes, they stay, and like we will have kicked again the can into the future by 2 years.
Okay.
My hope is that Parliament does not waste that 2 years waiting for things to change. Use that opportunity to actually have a solid discussion about whether we need to have fuel on taxes. Taxes on fuel. I'm just wondering what's special about fuel, because already VAT applies to many other things.
It's an easy sell.
Yes, it is. And there's nothing wrong with the KRA seeking the easiest one. Remember, it's Parliament that decides. So if Parliament decides, fine, then you have to tell them where to get the other revenues. But the point in my view is that all this comes back. The big lesson to take away is that all this is here because Parliament already approved budgets 3-4 years ago, which were extremely large.
Okay.
For some reason, we have to recoup. And one of the things we are going to have to do is to actually pay taxes. Okay. The second point is then Parliament needs a significant discussion. Fine, what has happened, passed under the bridges, Honorable Ichung'wa said but we are not going to have runaway budgets that we've had. I mean, these 3 trillion shillings budgets, to be honest, where even the president admits 20-30% of it is lost. It's not something we can countenance. A state can collapse because of the kind of stuff we see now. Okay,
divide that. That's I think it's about 2 billion per weekend, because we have how many weeks? We have about 365. So if we are losing 52, yes, it's about 400 billion. You know. Okay, let's talk to you. The president does or doesn't?
I would agree with what Kwame has said, but the issue that they were trying to address with the VAT on whatever taxes we have, I would request Mheshimiwa here and the fellow MPs in Parliament, the time has come to interrogate and audit our public debt. Let us get our public debt from the day Jomo Kenyatta took over to where we are today. Let us audit that budget and ferret out what did we borrow and what did we use on Kenyans. If we borrowed money and used that money to help Kenyans in whichever way, then that's a sovereign debt. We pay that debt. If we borrowed money and that money ended up in private pockets, then that is a regime debt, that's a private debt.
Okay.
Then what we are just doing right now, we say this debt will not be paid by Kenyans.
Okay.
It will be paid by the people who borrowed it.
Okay.
And we go just like we are demolishing buildings.
On behalf of?
The Republic.
Yes.
Just the way we are demolishing buildings. We liquidate the estates of these people
to pay that debt.
To pay the debt.
Okay.
And if there is not enough, we see how to go about it, so that we don't burden Kenyans with what did not benefit them.
Okay.
Because what we are calling foreign debt is a big percentage of it is a private enterprise. And why should people like me and Mheshimiwa here and Kwame and yourself be compelled to pay for what enriched an individual?
Okay.
So I would request that Mheshimiwa, you move a bill in a motion in Parliament to audit the public debt, to ferret out what is sovereign debt and what is a regime debt.
But private debt.
I don't know how long that will take us, and whether we'll even be able to recover everything that went into private hands. So probably the most important thing is, one, to support the president's campaign and this government's campaign against the graft, to make sure that every shilling that we borrow today goes into actual meaningful projects that will give value to the people of Kenya. Once we do that, I think we'll be safe enough, even as we bear the pain of paying what may have ended up in people's pockets. My hope and my prayer is that His Excellency the President, the ball is in his court, he will listen to the cry of Kenyans, and I know he's a listening president. He hears and listens to the cries of Kenyans, and not just the cries of Kenyans, because it's a very emotive issue. Also, with all estimations, it's not going to be good for the country's economy, and therefore there is a case for deferment of this tax. Then allow us to have an opportunity to interrogate and actually even relook, because we should not just do this and put it into the cabinet and forget for 2 years. We must now interrogate, how does the Kenya Revenue Authority work?
Okay.
Because I still maintain, Mijungu, that is the genesis of all our problems, be it revenue, be it leakage of what is collected into private hands. He's talking about borrowed money. The money that we ought to be generating from our revenues in forms of taxes that people are evading and not paying. They do that with direct collusion from revenue officers at KRA.
That's the only way it's possible.
If you are doing lifestyle audits on procurement officers and finance officers, I think that lifestyle audit also to have gone to KRA, especially those people working in the customs department, the large taxpayers unit, audit those people's assets and their lifestyles. or actually just do an assets audit, not even a lifestyle audit. Get to know who owns how many blocks of apartments in Kimani, in Ruaka here, in the Ndegwa here, and elsewhere.
Okay.
You will know how many revenue officers, how many senior officers at KRA own what.
Okay.
Compare that with what they have earned over the years. Then you will know where your money is going.
It's a complete mismatch. All right. Thank you very much. And finally, we have to do this now on the time bar. Now, the year is September 3rd, 2013, exactly 6 years to the day today. The headline is Tax Experts Fault Sharp Price Increases. Now, 5 months after President Uhuru Kenyatta was sworn in as the fourth president of Kenya, the issue at hand was the decision of the Treasury to implement the new VAT law. Now, the affected commodities were mobile phones, publications, charcoal, animal feeds, processed milk, tour operators were also affected, hotels, and of course, railway transport. Now, the new law was to regulate collection of value-added tax. Now, experts at that time faulted the implementation, while at the same time, they lauded the existence of that VAT. Now, they wanted to have it implemented, however, in a slow way, as opposed to the drastic manner in which KRA did. As 2013, with the new law implemented, the cost of manufacturing rose as the rate of petroleum products went up close to between 12 and 16%. Now, 6 years later, VAT on fuel products has come back to haunt us the second time in so few years. Ironically, the government first published the current VAT bill in 2013 with the objective of raising taxes. However, it was put on hold then and again in 2015 for the express reason that it will trigger economic crisis. Moreover, consumers already were paying so much tax on fuels. A new date for the implementation was set. That's September 1st, 2018. This is how we got here, and this is also a good place to end our program tonight. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Mheshimiwa Kimani Ichung'wa, thank you very much.
The VAT on animal feeds has since been repealed.
Okay, yes, it was, that was back in 2013. So thank you so much for coming, Kimani Ichung'wa, Kwame Owino, and of course, the litigator in chief. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. For my crew here, thank you, and have a good night. Let's do this again next week on Tuesday, same place, same time. My name is Ken Mijungu. Good night.
All bets on sports.
What is fair?
Huge winning.
What is fair?
High odds.
What is fair?
Fast pay.
What is fair? What is fair?
Bookmaker Company.